Hello, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a game by the name of Xcode. This is published in Germany by Spiel, and it is designed by Benjamin Lapp. It plays from 2 to 8 players. It's a cooperative game, and a round of it will take maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Although it is a campaign game where you're going to be playing many rounds, probably in a successive row. But a single round will take about 15 minutes. It is a game where players are playing hackers who are trying to essentially hack into a system by playing sets of cards collectively onto a common play area. So it's a real-time game which is going to have a timer. There's an app or a sound hourglass to do that. And let me take a few minutes to show you how the game works, and I'll let you know what I think about it when I come back. Xcode is a cooperative game for 2 to 8 players, and in the game, players are going to be cooperatively trying to complete the code. So this board here is essentially a board where players are going to be playing sets of cards onto these various symbols on the board. So at the very basic level of the game, players are going to need to get sets of 3 cards onto each of these symbols. So there's a stack of cards, and I should note that the game is played in real time. And in this stack of cards, there are cards that show all the various symbols on here. So the 1 through 9 with the 0, the pound, and the star. And then there are also a few special cards. There are these, which are time cards, and then there are some wild cards in here, which look like that. So, like that. So X's. So those are wild cards. So this is a cooperative game. So basically the way it works is based on the number of players that you have, you're going to have a different hand limit. And let's just say, I believe it's a 6-player game. You're going to have 6 cards, up to 6 cards in your hand. And so you'll start with 3 at the start of a round, and then you'll use the timer. So the game comes with an egg timer, or you could just use an app, which you could download, which is pretty much just a basic 3-minute timer that will be able to reset, so you could use that timer. And on your turn, and there's no strict turn order, it's just all at real time. Players could take actions as many times as they want. On your turn, your options are to either just draw a card, you just draw the next card from your pile, again observing your hand limit, to discard exactly 3 cards, so you could discard 3 cards down to the discard pile, which will help you if you're already at your hand limit and you want to cycle through more cards, or to play a set of 3 cards. So if I had 3 cards, like for example, if I had 3 threes, these aren't 3 threes, but if I had 3 threes, I could play them here on the 3 space. That would complete the 3s for all players. Or the last option that you will do will be to essentially swap cards with one of your neighbors. So in a 2-player game, a player could swap 1 card with, you'll notice on these cards, they have right and left arrows on them. In a 2-player game, a player is going to be able to swap a card with a blue arrow for a card with a yellow arrow. The actual number or symbol on the card doesn't matter. And the way swapping works is one player has to play down the card, say, can I swap this? The other player has to place their card on the table. Once that's done, each player could then swap back. So in a more than 2-player game, you'll be saying, in a circle around the table, so a player could only pass cards with a yellow arrow on them to their left, and a player can only pass a card with a blue arrow to their right. So if the player on my right set down this 3, they wanted me to have a 3 to match my 3, I could set down any card with a yellow arrow to swap that, and then we would be able to both pick them up and put them into our hands. So often the game is a logistics puzzle in trying to get that third or 3 that you need from that side of the table to this side of the table, using the other players to essentially create a bucket brigade to get the card back to you. So those wild cards could be used to help form any set. They essentially could stand in for, if I had 2 threes and a wild, I could play that to complete that. And these hourglass cards, the way that these work is that if ever you play 3 of them to this space here, the hourglass space, you could touch on the app, or you could either just flip the sand timer, which should give you more time, or you could touch the hourglass on here, which will essentially virtually flip the sand timer, so give you more time. So you might sit with those in your hand for a while, waiting till an opportune time to play them. So as you're going to go through the deck, if ever the deck runs out and you don't have a card to draw and you want to draw a card, you just flip over the deck, you don't reshuffle it, and then you could just continue drawing like that. The game goes until either you run out of time, then you'll lose, or until you've gotten all 12 of these spaces filled with sets of cards, then you would win. So that is the very basic level of the game. And the interesting thing about Xcode, or one of the interesting things about Xcode, is that it is essentially a campaign game. So this is how the box looks when you get it, and it comes with these cardboard keys to use, and you'll put those into an area here. Like, so once you've completed level 4 difficulty on the base game, then you're going to be able to go on and open up the first of these, the blue ones. And then you'll have to clear a few levels, and you can open up the next one, and so on, until you've opened up the last one and completed the final challenge. So that's the way that the campaign system works in it. So early on, what will happen is it'll change out the number of hourglasses that are in there, giving you fewer chances to reset the timers. It could reduce the number of wild cards that are in the deck. It could require you to lay sets of 4 down onto here instead of sets of 3. So the game will ramp up in challenge as you proceed through the levels. Then, I don't really want to spoil this, but just to give you a sense, after you pop these open, so the way this works is pretty cute. You just pop this open, there'll be a new set of cards under there. After you pop this open, you're going to get a new set of rules, and potentially some new cards, right? So I won't spoil everything that you get, but just to give you a sense of like one thing that will be in here, so maybe don't look if you don't want to get spoiled in this. There will be this set of cards, which it'll have you lay out in a configuration on the board, so something like this in a pyramid or what have you, and it'll require you to complete, this before you could get to these two. And then you could get to these. So it'll make it the order that you have to complete these sections change or what have you. So there's all these small variations, these small rules, which will just add up and make the game increasingly challenging as you work your way through these 3 boxes. But in general, this is going to be a game that is very raucous, especially if you're playing with more than 2 players. And very tense because you're going to be working against the time limit. I won't, again, spoil all the things that are in here, but that should give you a general sense of how Xcode plays. Okay, so Xcode is, as you can see, is a pretty simple game at its core. Essentially, the game is really going to be about cooperating with other players in order to get cards that you need in order to play them, within a time limit. I should mention, which I don't think I mentioned in the rules review, you can't actually show cards to each other, but you can communicate saying, does anybody have a third 3? I need a third 3, or what have you. In practice, at least with more than 2 players, where it's pretty deterministic, what you're going to be communicating with the other player. But in practice, because it's a real-time game, and because all players are going to be all trying to collect sets at the same time, it becomes pretty wild. I like to think of this almost as a co-op game of Pit, if you've ever played that classic game where players are in real-time trading cards with one another. Here the trading's a little bit more structured. You can only swap cards with players on your left or right. But as you add more players to it, the player that has the other card that you need might be all the way across the table. It'll take several turns to get that, several trades to get that card all the way over to you, all while the clock's ticking away. So it becomes a really wild, frantic game that keeps everybody involved at every moment. I think on the basic level, this is absolutely easy to play with children, play as a party game, play with non-gamers, but as it does increase in complexity and add rules upon rules, it does get a little bit more of a gamer's game, although at its very core, it's going to be a real-time, almost a party-style game, where players are just trying to race against the clock and frantically yell. So it's not going to be something for every taste, that's definitely sure, but at the same time, I like it more than I like most co-op games because it eliminates the problem of having one player tell every player what to do because of the real-time element, and that's something I usually like in my co-op games. I also really found it fun just unlocking the different challenges and going on from level to level and seeing how the challenges got progressively more difficult. It definitely gets more difficult by the end, although the very simple task that you're doing stays pretty easy from the start. It does add layers of essentially requirements and special powers and things that trigger off over the course of the game that are going to make that more difficult. Something that I should say to address that aspect of the game is Although, this is a German version of the game. If you speak German, it's not going to be an issue, but I'm an English speaker. I don't speak German. I was able to get English rules for the game off the publisher's website, but each of the compartments that you're going to open up over the course of the game does not have English rules in them. So I had to do a quick translation of those rules while I had players waiting around. So that kind of broke the momentum as we first went through those compartments. It wasn't a big deal. I reached out to a publisher to see if they could put those English rules for those extra things on their website like they have them for the actual base game. If not, I could surely post a translation for them on Board Game Geek if I don't hear anything back in a little bit. So they will be available, but just be aware as you progress through the game, you'll have to stop and read more rules, which, it's nothing terribly complicated that's being added. It's very incremental. It's usually just adding one or two more complications to it, maybe resetting the deck, changing the number of cards that are in the deck. So I wouldn't say that that's in any way a disqualifier for what I think is one of the more fun family-style games I've played this year. It's something that, it's so simple that seems almost more like an activity than a game. But I don't think that's in any way negative. It's something that's, it's just easy to catch on to, keeps you involved every moment that you're playing, and it's really fun to see, things go wrong in real time. I just find that to be a fun, activity, I guess. So I would definitely recommend that people check out Xcode. I wouldn't let the language restrictions hold you back from buying it. It's really terrific. I hope it gets picked up and republished in English because I think that it would do well over here as well. And those are my thoughts on the game, and thanks for watching.